based on the prevailing circumstances, and this has kept many wondering if the strike will change anything. These are the questions and others that we will be posing to our team of guests as we again beam our searchlight on matters arising from the current ASUU strike. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and I am Kirian Umayo, thanking you for choosing to stay with us this morning on the show.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo, and I join my colleague Kirian and also welcome you to this edition of the program, coming to you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. In the course of the program, we have regular complementary segments. These include business, newspaper review, and others, including sports, of course, and entertainment. Let's join our colleague right here with us in the studios, Fatima Abuba for the morning news. Hi, Fatima.
Hello, it's good to see you this morning. You're all looking all good.
And you too.
Good morning. You're welcome to the news. The federal government has drawn the line on hate speech, stressing that henceforth hate speech would be met with serious sanctions. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo, while declaring open a retreat on security by the National Economic Council, described hate speech as a species of terrorism which would no longer be tolerated.
The intimidation of a population by words, by speech, is an act of terrorism. And this government intends to take this matter seriously. As I've said, we've drawn a line against hate speech. It will not be tolerated. It will be taken as an act of terrorism, and all of the consequences will follow it.
President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed satisfaction with the steady progress in the global oil market, with the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries at the driver's seat. This was when the OPEC Secretary General, Dr. Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo, visited him at the Abuja house in London. The president said he has been following events within OPEC and the oil market with keen interest and commended the OPEC Secretary General for ensuring effective implementation of the declaration of cooperation between OPEC producers and non-producers since the assumption of the Nigeria's Dr. Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo as OPEC Secretary General in 2016. The national price of crude has appreciated considerably, thereby boosting the revenues of producing countries like Nigeria. The federal government and the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, have agreed to meet next week to enable ASUU get feedback on the offers by the government. The reconciliatory meeting, which had in attendance representatives of the government and ASUU, was held behind closed doors, although details of the offer to ASUU were not made public. However, there are indications that when ASUU returns with feedback next week, progress is likely to be made on the way forward.
Within the last 48 hours, government have been working. The Minister of Education, Minister of Finance, Attorney General of the Federation, and we are taking some government position, which we had communicated to ASUU.
Based on their advice, based on their position, we'll come back to government, hopefully within the next 1 week.
Will the strike be called off before then?
The leadership of the union did not call the strike. Our members called the strike. So they will decide when to suspend the strike.
Correspondent Emmanuel Ayimiro reports that both parties agreed to be open on best way to address the lingering problems affecting the implementation of the 2009 federal government ASUU and agreement. Moving on, Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed says provision of infrastructure to ease the difficulties faced by the citizens is a priority of the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration. The minister stated this when he officially opened AYA Abuja City Linking Bridge.
Kind of passion, tenacity of purpose. This is happening at a time of dwindling revenue. I think that says a lot for this administration.
Moving on, water supply and sanitation challenge is huge in Nigeria. but not unsurmountable, with collaboration of governments at all levels and development partners. This is the common ground at the regular meeting of the National Council on Water Resources holding in Akure under the theme Revitalization Urban Water Supply and Sanitation in Nigeria.
Whereby not a single community in today's Nigeria can boast of 100% pipe water supply is totally unacceptable in the 21st century. We intend to share available data with all the states, and it is my hope that your awful standing on access to water and sanitation shall serve as a wake-up call and ginger everybody to accelerated and concrete actions to address the situation.
Similarly, a team from the Office of the Ecological Fund is in Nasarawa State to undertake comprehensive assessment of degraded areas across the 13 local government areas of the state. Abubakar Usman Akwanga reports that the agitation by communities to be included amongst the Ecological Fund derivation states of the Federation may soon come to fruition.
Erosion, desertification, pollution, and even oil spillage.
We are calling on the federal government to rescue Nasarawa State from these ecological problems.
And on a sad note, a man and his 2 children lost their lives at the early hours of Thursday after a flood resulting from a downpour that lasted hours in Abuja. Basi Ita Ikbang visited the scene of the incidents.
You go to bus small, you go enter that place.
I took the man and the daughter to hospital. Getting to the hospital, he's dead. The doctor confirmed he's dead.
Very unfortunate that a man and his 2 kids will go like this. We are using this medium to at least plead with government that if they can come to our aid and just do something here. We need primary infrastructure, at least roads and drainage.
When someone's noticed rain, wherever he is, you should wait until the rain falls, and because if you drive inside water, you never can tell. You cannot find your way out. You can't find the actual route, and the tendency of you capsizing is high.
May their souls rest in perfect peace. And to electoral matters, towards adopting electronic voting system in Nigeria, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, NASENI, are collaborating to work out modalities for its actualization.
Solution offered by NASENI in the light of the needs of INEC. 3, assess the operational, technical, and social issues associated with an e-voting system in Nigeria in the light of the NASENI solution.
To study what NASENI has developed and to see how it could be adapted by INEC in the conduct of future elections.
And that's the news. Good morning, Nigeria will continue after the break.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Today, Ariel will show you how to save more in these tough times.
Why this powder?
It's pretty good and money's tight.
But Ariel gives better cleaning with less powder.
Impossible.
Come with me.
Spaghetti sauce, chocolate drink.
For these tough stains, I'll need 1, 2, and just 1 handful of Ariel. New Ariel gives better stain removal with less powder.
That's real savings. Ariel removes tough stains better in 1 wash.
Financial experts commend the federal government's fiscal and monetary policy, saying running an economy within the confines of current global realities, especially low oil prices, is not an easy task. Kolo Mohammed has details on this and more on Business News.
Hello and thanks for joining us on Business News. Globally, entrepreneurship is gaining ground as key to not only economic growth but also economic development, as it is said to pull more people from below the poverty line to financial independence much faster than other economic instruments. Experts, however, believe encouraging young entrepreneurship will put most economies on the path of sustainable growth and the future of prosperity.
To galvanize the young people, starting from the secondary school age kids into what we call sage teams, others call them business clubs. So we'll teach them how to start and run a business and how to help others, what we call corporate social responsibility. Now, the kids are taught how to write a business plan, how to pursue business opportunity, how to raise funding for business. In fact, the bottom line is the SAGE program helps to realign the mindset of young people to that, away from the mindset of entitlement to that of innovation and accomplishment.
The Students for the Advancement of Global Entrepreneurship is one way the Globe has been encouraging young persons to be innovative for self-reliance. Meanwhile, economic and financial experts have commended the current fiscal and monetary policies of the federal government. This, they say, have put the nation on the path of remarkable economic recovery.
That this government now realizing, taking into account the fact that we cannot continue running this economy on one product, is now laying so much emphasis on diversifying the economy. That is why today emphasis is on agriculture, emphasis is on the solid mineral sector. And with that, I can tell you, we're hopeful. Our economy will be diversified. Our resources of revenue will expand. And with the reorganization that has also taken place in the FIRS, the resources from that end will also come in to help in stabilizing the economy.
And the equities market upturned downward trend as all share index appreciated by 0.59% to close at 3,316.58 basis point, putting market capitalization at 12.517 trillion naira. That's Business News. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Kolo Mohammed, for the business package. And Good Morning Nigeria. Next for us, we go to the front pages of today's newspapers to check out the headlines. As usual, Bayo Atobe is right here with us for today's edition of Newspaper Review. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good morning, Bayo. And let's kickstart with these day newspapers. And here, above the nameplate, we have federal government concessions, narrow gauge railway lines to GE. That's on page 9 of these newspapers. And still below that, federal government ASUU meeting deadlocked, postponed till next week. Details of that story is on page 12. And now below the nameplate, we have some headlines here. Well, let's begin with what happened in Barcelona, Spain, just yesterday. A van hits crowd in Barcelona, terror attack, kills 13 and about 100 injured. It's on page 47 of this day. And then you can see the photograph there. That's President Muhammadu Buhari and, of course, the Senate President and House of Representatives Speaker Dogara. They are there meeting with the president in London. And beside that photograph, we have Buhari wants governors to support acting president, says Yari Saraki Dogara, of course, with present in London, have to do that. And below that photograph, hate speech will be treated as terrorism. Shebajo vows, and you can have more on that on page 9 of these day newspapers. Now, there's this striking one. Over 50 die of unidentified disease in Kogi State. What must that be? That's on page 49 of this day. Kinsley?
All right, Kirian, a number of the stories you read are also on the front page of the Authority newspaper, which is the next for us to take a look at. But the lead story for the Authority says federal government declares war on hate speech with 2 riders, violators to be treated as terrorists. That's attributed to acting President Oshibajo. And Catholic bishops oppose secession. Now, those are the riders to that lead headline. And above the name flag, you have other headlines. Some of them Kirian already read, but let's take this one. PAMSEC, that's the Federal Permanent Secretary, forfeits over 660 million naira and some $137,000 looted Shopee funds. Details on page 4. Now, all the other headlines there also indicate stories that are on page 4. One of them, of course, says Executive and National Assembly killing economy with jumbo salaries. That's according to former President Olusegun Obasanjo. The story on the strange disease killing some 50 persons in Kogi is also there. And federal government ASUU talks end in deadlock. Bayo.
Yes, let's start with the issue on hate speech. The acting president has declared promoters of hate speech are henceforth to be treated as terrorists. And this assertion he made to a meeting of the National Economic Council on retreat on national security. And he situated his assertion in the law. He says, Terrorism Prevention Act of 2011 defines terrorism as any an act deliberately done with malice which may seriously harm or damage a country or seriously intimidate a population. And therefore, the acting president says national security is being threatened by his speech. He actually spoke to the leaders and said, when speech that promote violence against individuals or group from our faith, tribe or group, and leaders keep silence, their silence tends to be an endorsement. And he said categorically, intimidating of people by words, by speech, is an act of terrorism, and henceforth it will be treated, and consequences that will matter will be that of terrorism. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onoge, was also there, but however, he was circumspect, and he said, I'm offering a personal opinion. And he said, insecurity, corruption, and impunity are the 3 sides of the same challenges that Nigeria is dodged with. Let me correct the impression about the 50 people that are said to be killed in Kogi State. Is actually in the village. Villages are on the border towns between Kogi and Kwara. It is affected border communities in Ifelo local government area, which and also Okura, Isaluesa in Yagba, west of Kogi State. And this thing has been on for a while now. Presently, the Commissioner for Health for Kogi State, Dr. Saka Audu, says that Lassa fever has been ruled out. His counterpart from Kwara State says that they have also invited the Nigerian the disease control unit to be there, and the epidemiologists are there trying to study what is there. Apparently, it has affected mostly herders who are in the village, and it is reported that the disease affects people. They throw up sometimes some black substances. And so some are speculating about viral hepatitis, but they are not sure what actually it is.
Yeah, but that's a public health emergency.
Yeah.
I mean, to lose 50 persons in a community or in a set of communities, that's a public health emergency, not just one, not just 2. I mean, if you have a case, one case of Ebola, everybody knows that this is serious. Lassa fever, I don't think the latest outbreak of Lassa fever has claimed that many lives. So we do hope the Nigerian Center for Disease Control will get on with this.
And again, our response, mechanism, the time it takes takes for us to respond to such issues, you know, is really not it at the moment, because well, nobody knows how long that has when it started. Actually,
it's been going on for about a few weeks now. They've already taken samples, taken it to the laboratories in Edo State, and that's why they were able to rule out Lassa fever. But they are still
they've not been able to you know,
study what actually it is and put a finger on it. But meanwhile, efforts have been made, and experts are there in the field trying to provide succor for the
50 deaths. That's
it's huge.
It's a huge number.
It's huge, you know, in a village.
50 human beings.
And who knows the nature of disease that is, because it could be spreading further to other communities.
Yeah.
All right, now we have a new telegraph here, and above the nameplate, federal government sets new target for 40% NNPC asset sale. And with the rider here, Kachuku contradicts NNPC on oil production cost. But you may have to talk on this, you know, as we progress. The story is on page 3. What one wonders why you should be contradicting the NNPC on oil production cost. Now, below the nameplate, we have some headlines there. We have we will treat hate speeches as terrorism or Shebajo, page 5. Strange disease hits Kogi State, also here on New Telegraph, is on page 62, on page 9 actually. Creditors invade sports ministry, cut away cars and generators. That's on page 38. Saudi arrests Nigerian pilgrim impounds 2 million naira recharge cards. Oh. All right, the main headline on New Telegraph is 2019, Dangote rules out presidential bid. Malls, the rider malls $50 billion investment in US, Europe, Asia, Mexico. The story is on page 2. And then he also said that I am not interested. There's quite a lot we can do from the business side. I enjoy a lot of what I am doing, and I also love my freedom. The little I have, politics will take away. I am not ready to give that up. Now, that's Dangote there for you. You also see a photograph of the president and the Senate president and speaker of the House of Representatives, and also another photograph here by the left side. And he said we take deliveries with torchlight. That's Imo State doctors. That's on page 9. And again, water crisis hits Queen's College. Students offered automatic promotion without examination. That's on page 3. Who knows why that decision should be taken? And now,
well, the school had been closed down. I mean, there were some students
promoted without exams.
Why the students died on account of the pollution of their water sources.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, junk food increases cancer risk in women on page 7. That's for Health Matters now.
All right, let's, Kira, you have another story there.
Yes.
Let me just go over to Ogre. Let's take Daily Trust from you.
Let me conclude my own aspect with the Daily Trust. And the main headline, 50 killed as disease hit Kogi Kwara. Of course, that's the story that's been trending on some of the, front pages of national dailies today. We are investigating, that's NCDC says. Now, serving pump sex to forfeit 664 million Shopee fund on page 4. The TSA, federal government invests 300 billion naira on claimed funds in treasury bills on page 13 of the Daily Trust.
All right, let's take a look at the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune, of course, also has, if you look at the front page, once it pops up on the screen, you will see that some of the stories are also there in the other papers that we read. But just immediately below the nameplate, you have a window of 3 headlines. Federal government hands over Presidential Lodge in Marina to Lagos government. That story is in greater detail inside. Also inside, South Africa's policemen strangled Nigerian to death. That's on page 6. And then if you come straight down, immediately below the photograph on the front page, you have 3 other headlines there. It says, Diaries of Chibok Girls. Boko Haram found nothing to steal in school, then abducted us. That's a special report you can find on page 8. Now, restructure before 2019 or Adebajo, Akinade, others tell federal government. And further, 2 children die in Abuja community flood. Bayo.
Yes, sad story about Nigerian strangled in South Africa. The report indicated that he was suspected to be having drugs. 3 policemen accosted him, and in his bid to try and swallow what they alleged was a drug, they held his neck, and in the process, I think they choked him, and he died. The latest development on ASUU strike are quite conflicting. Some papers are reporting that Minister says there is hope that the strike will be called off by next week because of the initiatives that have been put on ground. Other people report about deadlock. In fact, Punch says it is deadlock, while leadership says that the strike continues. However, the Minister for Information says that ASUU demand of payment of 1.5 billion monthly will be met with effect from Monday. He, however, said that the balance of the 25 billion that they are demanding of the 53 billion agreed will be only paid when they account for the 30 billion that has already been paid. But he was quite categorical that the exclusion that the University ASUU was demanding from TSA will not be granted. The TSA is a rule that nobody is excluded from. He, however, has indicated that all things being equal, from the meeting he had with the Senate Committee Chairman for Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund, the strike is likely to be called off next week because they are making progress. The World Athletics Championship has ended, but Nigeria as a team did not win any medal. But two Nigerians won medal. One was Chijundu Uja. They call him CJ Uja. He was running in the banner of Great Britain. So was Salwa Eld Nasser, who was running for Bahrain. His mother, her mother, is Nigeria. Guess what? Listen to this roll call. You had Maria Chibu running for Italy. You had Akin Osun running for USA. You had Ajomale running from Canada. Ayokunle Folonsho running for Italy. Edidong Odion running for Bahrain. James Dasaolu running from Great Britain.
What do you get, in a country where you don't have facilities for training, and where some of the associations that are responsible for certain sporting activities are not doing well locally. So these are Nigerians who find their way where they can have a better treatment, where they have facilities to train and run, because it's all about personal satisfaction. Yes. They are sports people. They want to, make headlines before age, catches up with them. So
I agree with you entirely, because the pointer is that the talents are there. If we get our acts together, provide the facilities as you have indicated, then Nigeria stands to challenge the world in any aspect of this human endeavor.
Well, Bayo, I mean, it's one of the stories that Kirian read earlier was from New Telegraph. Yes. Just below the nameplate of New Telegraph, there's a story there, one of the four windows, saying creditors invade sports ministry, cut away cars and generators. Of course, I mean, this is just one indication of the challenges that the Ministry of Sports faces. Last year, we had the Olympics in Rio, and we saw what our performance was like. It was woeful. Now you had the IAAF, which of course ended on Sunday, and we also saw what our performance was like. You're having the Olympics again 3 years from now. What is our preparation? IAAF will also come up in 2 years' time in Qatar. What's our preparation? We're relying on Blessing Okagbare. I mean,
there are many other Blessing Okagbare across the nation. Yes. You cannot even identify them. But let me point this out.
The danger is this.
Growing up, in primary school, we used to play long tennis, javelin, shot put in primary school. But at a point, these things fizzled out in institutions of higher learning, because probably there are private schools who are just rented apartments converted to schools. You can even have a stretch of 100 meters for students to train.
Yes, you put your finger on the problem. School sports was the ground for which future athletes were gotten from. And that has gone down unless we go back and establish school sports competitions from primary, secondary school level, and tertiary institutions. We are not able to meet the standard we have attained, even on the continent of Africa.
That's an issue we've also taken up on the program when we discussed revival or revitalization of grassroots sports. Now, but at the elite level, which is where you have IAAF, Olympics, and so on and so forth, it requires a different kind of strategy to succeed. But we also heard, it was said that, listen, you don't need to train to win medals. So I'm sure they saw what happened at IAAF in London.
Have to train to win medals.
And many of these athletes, many of them are actually students.
Yes, they live on that, and they have sponsorship abroad, and that's why they are able to sustain. But the dread is that if the facilities are provided locally, more potential Kagbaris will be.
All right, Baya Toby, that's the much that we can take. We'd like to appreciate your being with us all through the week. We hope you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and by the way, you saw that story on the fatality arising from the flood in Abuja yesterday. You know,
yes,
we're discussing the rainfall consistent, you know, for the past 5 or 6 days. All right, so this is Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll be discussing issues arising from the ongoing strike by ASUU.
I don't come out my hand from oil bunkering. General, what you going to yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though. Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants say, you know good. Me, I not do against Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Marriage is a union between a spouse and the spouse of the spouse and the family of the spouse.
You're not only married to your husband, but to his brothers and sisters.
Oh yes, but only where that is sensibly convenient. Don't get it twisted. Marriage is as sweet as you make your home for your partner. He or she is not your slave or a workhorse, there to serve your brothers, sisters, and relatives to her own detriment or his own detriment.
It is foolery of you to have allowed your family members cause catastrophic quagmire of epic proportions in your marriage.
So says Professor John Bull, your rib-cracking comedy in this episode titled Married to Family.
They want to take advantage of my phenomena.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. To kickstart our discussion on the matters arising from the strike by ASUU, let's take this background report by Salihu Abdullahi.
Since Nigeria returned to democracy in 1999 to date, a year hardly ends without the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, shutting down academic activities. An action that at times make students to stay at home for a maximum period of 6 months, as experienced in 2003. These actions could be traced to the foremost demands of an increase in their salaries of 15%, an increased funding to universities in view of the deteriorating and decreasing standard of education. But that seems like an unending demand, as various administrations have to battle the challenge of building industrial peace and harmony. It is 5 days now that President of Academic Union, Biodun Ogunyemi, announced the commencement of another strike because of the federal government's failure to implement its 2009 agreement and 2013 Memorandum of Understanding. Other reasons listed for the strike include non-payment of salaries of some of their staff, non-payment of earned academic allowances EAA, removal of universities' staff schools from funding by government, and non-implementation of provisions of the 2014 Pension Reform Act with respect to retired professors and their salaries. Already, academic activities have been put on hold across the country in virtually all government universities in compliance with the directive. The committee headed by Babalaki was given the mandate to dialogue with the ASUU and other unions to ensure sustainable peace and industrial harmony in tertiary institutions. Although it is not certain what the outcome of the ongoing negotiations will be, but government is optimistic that the issue will be resolved soon in the interest of all. While this is on, discussants on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria will be looking at issues that are responsible for incessant strikes by ASUU, highlights way for more friendly employer-employee relationship in addressing the dangerous trend which analysts say is unhealthy to the nation's development.
All right, thank you very much for that background report. Now we have 3 guests with us on the program. But just before we start, we need to indicate that we had reached out to officials of the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian Universities, that's ASUU, but unfortunately they are unavailable for today's edition of our conversation. But we'll proceed regardless with the 3 guests that we have. They are all professors, and so they're quite familiar with the university administration and university environment and matters pertaining to the ongoing strike, as well as efforts that have been made in the past. First, we'd like to welcome at this time Professor Mohammed Mainoma. Professor Mainoma is the Vice Chancellor of Nasarawa State University. Nasarawa State University, of course, is a state-owned university next door to us here in the Federal Capital Territory. Professor Mainoma, a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
You're welcome. Good morning.
All right. And then we also have with us here a former Minister of State, as well as Nigeria's former ambassador to Canada, Professor Yowese Hahe. Professor Hahe, a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Right. And joining us from Lagos, our network center there, is Professor Ayo Ibidabo Obe. He's a former Vice Chancellor, University of Lagos. Professor Ibidabo Oye, I have just been corrected there. Professor Oye, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure once more to have you join us on this conversation segment of Good Morning Nigeria. And ASUU has embarked on yet another strike. That's the story trending everywhere. And one wonders whether this is not one strike too many. And it will be good for us, for the guests here to actually, talk on this. And I'd like to begin with Professor Mainoma.
Thank you very much. I think the question is whether it is one strike too many. I want to believe that the last time ASUU went on strike must have been 4 years ago, a full-blown indefinite strike. There was certainly at the end of last year a warning strike for 1 week to intimate the people concerned that there are issues that need to be addressed. So you realize that it is not really the strike per se that is too many, but it is the attitude of the stakeholders that is actually the major issues. If you have agreed to go into an agreement with a group of people, and the agreement says that after 4 years it is going to be reviewed, and since 2009 this agreement is signed, and a substantial part of it is not implemented, you'll find out that you will not want to only blame those going on strike, but you also have to blame the government for its inability to even explain its incapacities.
All right, Professor Mainoma, we'll come back to you. Let's bring in Professor Hahe at this time. Professor Hahe, one strike too many?
No, certainly not. The strike is necessary, it is crucial, and it is timely. The ASUU has had enough time over the years. ASUU has been the conscience of the nation. The country, Nigeria, has taken too long to get its act correct. Get its act together, get its act correct, to take the right step. Education is the most crucial need for this country, just like any other country in the world. It is too sad, too bad, and something that the whole country should back ASUU to hold the federal government to account, and the people of Nigeria must understand that education is not something to play with. It seems over the years that our people have chosen to invest in ignorance. And ignorance is much more expensive than education. All the problems we have in the country are indeed as a result of not investing enough in education. This is why UNESCO said any country, any developing country that is serious about being developed should invest in education at least 26% of the budget. Now, over the years, Nigeria has never, ever approximated that. The highest we had during the previous regime was 14%. When the present government took over, last year we had 8%, and this year, unbelievably, we have 6%. Obviously, ASUU is looking at the situation in the country. ASUU is made up of Nigerians like the rest of us, and I do not imagine that professors in the university will go on strike as a matter of a joke. They are also stakeholders. Their own kids are also in these universities. So for them to go on strike is timely, is to tell the people of Nigeria that we can no longer invest in ignorance.
All right, Professor Ahe, thank you very much. We'll come back to you as well. Of course, you saw a moment ago on the screen Professor Oye Ibidapo, former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos, also Vice-Chancellor of one of the newly established federal universities. Professor Ibidapo, same question to you. Is the current ASUU strike one strike too many?
First and foremost, let me say that I do not believe that ASUU should use strike weapon. And my reason is very clear. My reason is that ASUU, being part of the elite group in this country, are responsible for even some of the shortcomings that we have in this country. I thought we could have a better way to get what we need from government rather than strikes. Strikes are too demeaning. As a matter of fact, I think strikes reduce the profile of professors. It reduces the esteem of professors in the public glare. So I believe that strike is not an option in solving this problem. The problems are there all over this country. But again, who are the managers of this country? Members of ASUU are managers of this country, whether we like it or not. So we must find a way to make sure that the government or whoever is there does whatever we have. At this particular time, look at where we are. We have a professor as the acting president. Not only a professor that is imported from overseas, our own professor from the University of Lagos is the acting president. So why can't we have a way of reaching him to solve this problem before we go on strike? It reduces our esteem. That's what I say. I even think strikes, yes, at the very junior level, I will accept, I will agree. But again, what bothers me more is that when this matter came to the fore and Dr. Wale Babalaki committee was set up to look at this, I can bet that there are some lapses within the bureaucracy that did not allow him to do what he has to do. What we need to do is to go back and actually monitor those dialogues. When it was set up, I don't know, it was monitored. And I believe, I don't know, that perhaps the wherewithal to make sure that that job is done was given. That is the problem. And again, I say that as part of the elite group of this country, we need to really roll up our sleeves and be part of that solution, the problems of which we have jointly created.
Thank you there, Professor Obe, for differing actually from your the other guests we have here in the studio, Professor Benoma and Haya. Well, gentlemen, the issue here is not that there is no enough reason to go on strike, but according to Professor Obe, he is saying that that's not the best option for now, and also considering the fact that whatever is happening in that sector is also affecting other sectors of our national life. And I'd like to once more bring in Professor Benoma here. How would you respond to Professor Obe's submission?
Yeah, you realize that his position is not as if there is no problem, but that he says that strike is not the best option, or it's not an option. But he has not, as a professor, also said what the option is. You have a situation where you cannot even teach properly. You have a situation where the materials in question are not available for you to teach. You have a situation where people are not even concerned about the crisis in the system. So, and you also realize that the only thing our leaders understand is crisis management. It is unless you say that this is a problem that is going to stop them from doing what they are doing, they cannot respond to you. There is nothing, yes, if the government, ASUU people are so responsible that if you tell them this are your situation and you want an option out of your situation, you cannot do A, B, C, D. You sit them down without a strike, they will listen to you and they will propose possible options that you can take to tackle your problems. But a situation where they do not even talk to you about it. You write them letters upon letters, they don't even respond to them. So what do? And you say that strike is not an option. It is a situation where if that is the only thing that will make them to say, come to the round table, and then you use it. And I think that is just what the situation is. ASUU is more concerned that nobody wants to go and be idle. But the situation where you cannot even do what you are supposed to do at the minimal level, that's where the problem is. To the situation where you find some universities staying for 11 months without salaries. How can you go and teach?
All right, Professor Menoma, thanks. Still on this subject, Professor Ahe, what's your reaction to Professor Ibidapo, who says that strikes, in his opinion, almost should be a weapon of last resort, that it strikes bend to demeaning and reduce the profile of professors?
I don't think that strikes is demeaning and reduces the profile of professors. It's not violence. They are speaking. It's the end of dialogue. If you keep speaking and people don't listen to you, well, they simply stopped speaking. ASUU members are also part of Nigerian society. They see on television, on radio, and on social media the children of the leaders graduating in foreign universities. They see colossal corruption being discovered every day. They see retired military and other retired people in the public service living lives of great opulence, while a professor retires and dies pursuing his pension. They see a country that simply is paying lip service to education, and it is extremely dangerous because we see Nigerians going to other countries and excelling. The first generation of educated people in this country went away. In each country of the world now, you have Nigerian professionals who are excelling because the Nigerian seed is beautiful, it is fertile. Nigerians are brilliant people. But if there is no fertile ground, which education is, they can't grow here. And so ASUU is just reminding Nigeria, get your ass correct, get your priorities right. And they have given sufficient reasons. The Babalaki Committee was set up in February. 6 months after that, we are being told that they had some administrative hitches. What are the administrative hitches? When will the administrative hitches be over? Could it be 1 year or 2 years?
And therefore go on strike. All right, Professor Hahe, thanks a lot. Kirian, let's return to Professor Ibidapo. Professor Ibidapo, of course, you listened to the comments of your brother professors here with us in the studios, in particular Professor Menoma. I mean, he's tried to recount what he thinks are the challenges. There are no facilities, no equipment. Professors are poorly paid, others don't get their pay. But let's back up a bit and go to recent history. 25 years ago, when we started having this rush of strikes by ASUU, that was in 1992. Up to this moment, is it necessarily correct to still assert that the situation in our tertiary institutions, particularly universities, hasn't changed? Bearing in mind the following. One, the rise of TED Fund as well as contribution of TED Fund. The grant of relative autonomy to universities with regard to appointment of their vice chancellors, grant for further studies and so on and so forth, and upscale of facilities in the various universities, at least in federal universities and to some extent state universities.
Of course, let me first say that all the arguments that my colleagues have put forward. We know the situation in the Nigerian university system is not sufficiently encouraging for decent learning. As a matter of fact, when I go elsewhere and I look at the systems that we have here, I wonder what happens that those students, even when they leave us in this country with degrees as poor as third class, they go to the United States, they excel. Give them 2 years, they excel. So I understand, I agree that our infrastructure here is not sufficient to do that. But what I'm trying to say is that at a level, within the stratum of the society, should it be strike, strike, strike? If you know the trouble that our students, our graduates get through before they get admitted, why not the fact that they always do well? They will not take them at all. Because the story you hear from Nigeria, most of the time about our graduates, about our university, is strike, strike, strike. I'm saying this strategy will have to change. More so that even within the political circles, we are getting more and more of our graduates, of our people into politics. So I think, and let me tell you, that universities, especially university students, can be mobilized even by us to ensure that they get the right things to do. I believe this idea of going to strike is not good enough. Even if government is not doing what they are supposed to do. I do agree. I've talked about the government bureaucracy that stops things. We can reach those people in power to do the right thing. We have every opportunity, more so now, to reach people in government to do the right thing. I just believe that the weapon of strike, to me, is quite puerile, it's quite infantile. I think we must move to another strategy. What is that strategy? As somebody said, it's intensive negotiation, time-bound, not that you set up a committee to talk to ASUU and you don't give them deadlines, you don't even come back and find out what they are doing. You can do an intensive negotiation that can even be public, that everybody knows what is being, which area, 2009 agreement, what are the components, what have you done, when do we expect something? I believe that that should have been done in a more vigorous, professional way in terms of negotiation, rather than wait, oh, we have no meeting today. Even now, with all the problems that we see, I see in the news this morning that you said that, well, they broke off now, that perhaps next week they will meet. A serious problem is not like that. When you want to tackle a serious problem, it's 24/7 negotiation and working. It's not a question of, well, let's take a break. And that's what I'm saying, that the seriousness that is being, or the seriousness that is being shown in this matter bothers me a lot. And I still believe, honestly, that it reduces the type of prestige. I've been a professor now for over 30 years. And I know that when I was first professor, I know the type of respectability that I have, not only in this country, but elsewhere. But what do we have now? What do we have now? You know, they've reduced that prestigious position to nothing, you know, within the society. And that bothers me. That makes me quite unhappy.
Remaining with you, and of course, considering what Professor Ha had said here, that when ASUU writes to government, several letters have been written according to him, and no response. Now, you are preferring a solution, you know, whereby you said that there should be intensive negotiation. Whom are you going to negotiate with if the government is not coming up? That is what Professor Ha said here. Now, you have been a professor, you have been a vice chancellor of a university. How would you handle this if you find yourself at the helm of affairs of ASUU and you have written letters and no response from government? How would you take that?
Very much. I would not just write letters and sit. I will ensure that letters get responded to. Well, why can't I talk to them? If I'm a chairman of ASUU, so I will not be able to talk to the Minister of Finance, nor the Minister of Labor, or even the acting president. I will talk to him. I will get a way to talk to him to respond to my letter. You just don't write letters and sit down and hope that they will get to you. That's what I'm saying, that there are other ways. Is the level of pressure, the level of something that we put into this matter. I've been vice chancellor. When I was vice chancellor in the University of Lagos, if we have strike, you know, I came out with this idea that, look, let's think globally and act locally for the interest, for the same reason that Professor Hai have said, that at the University of Lagos at that time, about 32% of our students are even are children of staff. So why do you want to shoot yourself in the leg? Okay, so there are ways of doing this. I think it's the level of pressure that we give and the level of, but this the idea of strike Nigerian University has started to affect us. That has started to affect our respectability even in the society. And I thought we can. How can you be a super elite, a vice chancellor, for example, or a former vice chancellor, or chairman of ASUU, for that matter, and you cannot talk to the president if you need to? I don't think we've explored all the possibilities of resolving these problems.
All right, Professor Ibilapo, thanks a lot, but you didn't quite address the question that I posed, but I posed the same question to Professor Menoma here with regard to the fact that what we have seen over a 25-year period, because at some point in the course of the incessant strikes that we have seen ASUU embark upon, there have been a number of issues on the table. I talked about TED Fund, intervention of TED Fund, you know, training opportunities, provision of infrastructure, and relative autonomy for universities, how federal universities get to appoint their vice chancellors, the role of the visitor, and so on and so forth. Have we seen any progress over a 25-year period with regard to the health, welfare, as well as, shall we say, profile, reputational profile of our universities?
Yes, to be candid, but you also agree that that is because of the strikes. And that is where the problem is. Once you find out that you do other things, you don't get outcome. But when you do the strikes, you get outcome. If you take TED Fund, for instance, it was the 1992 agreement that brought out about the TED Fund matter. It was a suggestion by us that there should be that way of getting money that is going to enhance the capabilities of the universities. And it was an outcome of a strike. If you take the autonomy question also, it was an outcome of a strike. So whatever you look at, it is that because it is only the strike that gives the kind of benefits to the university system. And I do not see anything that anybody is going to be worried that there is a temporary closure for enhancement. That's why people go on holidays. When you go on holidays, you relax, and at the end of the day, you perform better. So if what the government...
So the strike is a holiday?
No, I do not say it is a holiday. I'm just saying that if you go on holiday, you come more rejuvenated and do better things. So what is the difficulty in saying, for instance, that if that is the only way you can get government to listen, then let them listen within a very short period. Like he has said, it is something that can be done consistently, which ASUU is available and is willing, that they don't mind meeting for 10 hours at a go. So if that is the situation, it is again government that is the issue. So all that they need to do is to sit down with ASUU within 1 week, resolve all the issues, do those things that can be done, put a schedule for those ones that cannot be done immediately, and ASUU will accept. So the issue of closure, we all go for weekends, we all go for end of session, like in my university, for instance, where we have finished the session, and we were not going to reopen until October. So if you use the period between now and October and resolve all the issues, we'll open normally in October.
And those that are in session are about to write their exams?
The issue is that they will come and still do the exam, and if they can do the exam, if this matters is resolved within 2 weeks, which ASUU is willing to sit down and do it, they can continue with the exams.
Gentlemen, you know, what many Nigerians observe here is the fact that, just as Professor Minoma pointed out, that strike is what government listens to. And when you go on strike, they now have time to sit you down and dialogue with you. Now, the Minister of Education admitted the fact that the blame is on the government, for breaching, the contract agreement between government and ASUU. But he also said that the normal procedure for going on strike was also breached by ASUU. And from what the president of ASUU said a short while ago during our news, he said that it is the members that called the strike and not the leadership of ASUU. But one wonders how members could call strike. Are they not there to steer the affairs of ASUU? And I'd like Professor Hare to come in here.
Basically, let me react to an earlier question about the gains of the educational sector, especially in the universities. Every university, federal university, state university you go to now has got enhanced infrastructure. The infrastructure of buildings, labs being equipped, and also university autonomy is still being pursued, and councils. And this is a major achievement, again, due to ASUU strikes. Every single benefit comes as a result of the strike. But if ASUU leadership says this strike is caused by the body of ASUU, then it shows how very virulent, how democratic ASUU is. Because there are some trade unions in this country where the leadership negotiates away the rights of the union, and they cannot go on strike, but it hurts. The professors lose dignity, not because they are on strike, but because government policy, not paying professors salaries or paying them half salaries. I'm referring to professors, I refer to lecturers and everybody who is in the university system. You don't pay them, or you pay them half salaries. They are asking about earned allowances. They are asking government to set up the pension scheme commission for the universities. These are legitimate things they are asking for. And strikes, they are not really things that anybody is asking for. And I wish we could find a better way. I have thought of better ways personally, and I thought maybe if we had the parents of these students, while the period of strike, don't go on strike. We will instead go to the National Assembly and stand there every day and demonstrate that you should be paid so the university can continue, so that it is still effective. Or the students dedicate, maybe the strike should not be total, maybe 5 days, 4 days in a week, and 1 day we go on strike and march to government houses to register our voice. These are different ways in which we could demonstrate the fact that dialogue is not working. And certainly dialogue has not worked here. The fact is that if we don't listen to ASUU, the universities will continue to degenerate. There is no political will here. Agreements are signed, and when people sign agreements, they should be responsible. And when a government signs an agreement, they should actually make sure that they keep to their terms of agreement. Otherwise, they are in default. And to blame ASUU, they didn't give us enough notice, when it is government that, in the first case, flouted the agreements. It is not correct to blame ASUU or the ASUU leadership because they listen to the body of ASUU. They must listen to the body of ASUU. And I believe that ASUU, the time has come for them to find a better way. Certainly, I believe we can have a better way, because education in Nigeria is eroding, and our universities are not rated so highly in the world as they used to be, and this is affecting the quality of the manpower we are putting up. It also makes something even more dangerous take place. Brain drain.
All right, Professor, we'll come back to you. Just before we return to Professor Ipidapo, because I'll put the same question to you presently, but the question first is going to Professor Mohammed Menoma. Professor Menoma, who is on strike at the moment? Is it federal universities or state universities, or a combination of federal and state universities?
It is a combination of federal and state universities because it is a body of ASUU completely that is on strike.
All right, so okay, that's the first question. Next leg of it is as follows. What is your response to observers who have often questioned the fact that ASUU negotiates, we're talking about government. State governments are having challenges paying their salaries of their workers. So ASUU reaches an agreement with the government, federal or state or otherwise, and then you come back to the state level, and then you have challenges paying this. So why is it that when people are clamoring for true federalism, we're having unitarism with regard to ASUU and what needs to be done?
You see, it is, when you look at it, the state governments voluntarily agreed to set up universities. And these universities are set up with conditions. And they are actually supervised generally by NUC. So you find out that it is something that you have voluntarily agreed to set up. You don't have to set up a university as a state government. But if you do, there are certain things that you must do. And we cannot afford a situation where the level of education at the state level is different from that at the federal level. So the facilities, the infrastructures should be the same. So if you agree to set up a university, you should also agree to fund it adequately, at least to the level that it can operate minimally.
And if you don't have the financial muscle?
The options are yours.
No, let's just make a suggestion.
Yeah, to me, I believe what they should do is to present their issues also to federal government and see how they can readjust the funding issues. There is nothing wrong in telling, for a state government, for instance, to say that, look, education is on the COCORO list. This is our capacities. We cannot do ABC there. And then the government at the federal level should be able to address those issues, even if it is, for instance, through TED fund. That, okay, for state governments, we realize that there are certain states that cannot do ABCD in terms of financing education. So we are taking away some of these issues from you. For instance, the federal government can decide, okay, all payments of salaries should be done generally by the federal government.
Why?
Because it is education. The importance of education should not be left to any individual that cannot do it.
All right, Professor Menoma, thank you very much. Professor Ebidapo, we're still on the same subject matter. Everybody's crying. I mean, generally, there's talk of true federalism, and yet with regard to ASUU, what we are saying is unitarism. Should states not take responsibility for their own universities and therefore have their own templates, such as you have for private universities, and the federal government faces its own issues? Why are we, as it were, bunching up everybody, and at some point you have states that cannot even pay their own civil servants?
Thank you very much. It's a case of, having a cake and still eating it. State governments that cannot afford to have universities should not. And I think that's where AUC comes in. However, because this state government, they go to AUC, they apply to set up universities. I would have imagined that AUC would have satisfied that they have the financial muscle to do so. So any state government that cannot support a university, that university should be closed down. We just have to be realistic on these things that we are doing. I'm in agreement with my colleagues that things are really bad. I mean, I cannot imagine teachers teaching and not being paid their salaries. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine professors working and working and working over the years, retiring, and they are as if they've just finished graduating. I cannot imagine. I do agree with what is on the ground. I do agree with the issues that we're talking about. What I'm saying is that this strike matter is not appropriate. It is old-fashioned. It's not good enough for us. That we should have an alternative. And one of these alternatives I'm saying is that there should be intent. We can force them to a negotiation table, whoever they are. They can be forced to a negotiation table. And there are tools that we can use. Tools of parents, as my colleague said, tools of students, as can be suggested, so that they are forced to a negotiation table. But each time when we go and go on this strike, it reduces. Yes, strikes in the past have done great things for us. It has brought in TED fund, it has brought in improvement in salaries, it has brought in some infrastructural stuff in the something. Yes, strikes have done that. There's no doubt about that. That ASUU has been able to achieve some of this. But why is it not sufficient? Because things are improving every day. So it's never going to be an end game. It's not going to be an end game. The end game is to have this strategy of reviewing and doing an intensive negotiation to get better things for the university system. And by the way, maybe I should say so, in this country, we've been talking so much about this UNESCO 26%. There is no place where it's been stated that everybody should do 26%. As a matter of fact, when we had regional governments here, some governments were doing as high as 56, even 72% that we have on record. So this 26% is a mirage. It's not there at all. It's not there in any UNESCO. You can check from UNESCO in Rome and find out where is the 26%. They will tell you. But somehow, I don't know how it got into our vocabulary, and everybody says UNESCO has said 26%. I'm not aware of this. I've checked. I've not seen it, and I've not gotten something. But what is actually on the ground this morning is not so much about the state of our universities. What is on the ground is the methodology that we have to do to get things for our universities, to get things to make sure the universities are. That's the methodology. That's what I'm saying. That we need to change our strategy. We need to move away from strikes. We need to find a way whereby we can talk to these people. I mean, these are some of them are our students, some of them are our staff. So why can't we talk to them? If there's some people in this country that ASUU cannot talk to, then we have serious problem. And I don't think we have got to that stage yet. That is my submission, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Kingsley, you wanted Professor Hyatt to also talk
also speak yes on this issue of state universities, and then, I mean, why do we need to work out the uniform pay structure, uniform conditions of service and terms for both state and federal, when we also know the differences in the financial powers of these different tiers of government?
Many states that have established universities established them because of the need of their people. Other states established them purely for prestige purposes. Not many states have been able to pay salaries of their workers, including, in fact, the fact that primary school, secondary schools, teachers have not been paid, civil servants have not been paid. But I know states that have tried, no matter how deficient their allocations, to ensure that universities in their states were paid. Yet they cannot do it because of the economic situation as it is. But the economic situation affects everybody. And if it affects everybody, the ASUU, the educational sector, to get 6%, it doesn't matter whether UNESCO has said that or not. What matters is that there are countries in Africa, like Ghana, 31% of their budget is on education, Kenya, 23%, South Africa, 25%, even Uganda, 27%. And you see, the Nigerian graduate is not competing with other Nigerian graduates. He's competing in the global community. Our PhDs are competing with the global community. Our professors are competing with the global community. So states that cannot pay their salaries, the federal government should, of necessity, take over and pay all universities in the country and guarantee that the universities, which is producing the highest manpower for the country, should not be left in the hands of the states. That is why TED Fund, for instance, caters for both federal and state universities. And therefore, the federal government should guarantee that. Indeed, I speak to you not just as a university professor. I speak to you wearing many caps as a former senator in this country, as a former diplomat and university professor. I've been through all this. And the same thing to do in this country is for government to simply devolve the Ministry of Education and send the entire paraphernalia of the responsibility for education to that of the states, as is done in other countries. In Canada and United States, and indeed other countries, including the UK, we have states, we have regions that are taking care of their education. And there's no federal paraphernalia, federal bureaucracy that is duplicating efforts, and so much money is being spent at the center, when the real need for the country, for the money, is to be spent in the states, in the universities, in the secondary schools and primary schools. Indeed, you will recall that the major universities we have in this country were established by the regions. And later, the federal government took over. I think when we're talking about restructuring, education should be the first thing to be restructured. And the states should, therefore, take a lion's share. And really, all the Ministry of Education should be doing is to regulate how education is conducted in the states, instead of saying that states should not start universities. They should start universities. Every single state should start a university, because there's no single state that does not need education. And if we choose education or ignorance, then we will not start universities, and we will continue to deny payments of salaries to staff of the universities, and to humiliate our professors and our teachers, because the decay starts right from primary school. There are some primary schools in some states that have not even been paid for 1 year, and they are still expected to get up and teach. And this thing is going to continue on and on. So ASUU should be listened to, should be respected, should be dignified by government paying something that is commensurate with the total budget. If your budget is just 1 million, give 26% of that to education, because education matters.
All right, Professor, you know, there are also other sectors. I think part of the problem is, like you said, education is on the concurrent list, and the states can actually establish universities, but when they are not really prepared financially and otherwise to run a university, we keep running into this problem of planlessness and the inability of government to really fulfill its own, part of whatever agreements that have been reached in the past to keep education, moving on. Well, there are other issues we're going to talk about because, of course, the professors and the lecturers in the universities also have a role to play in all of this. But when we return from this break, we'll engage ourselves with other issues concerning university operations. So this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We're going on a break right now, but when we come back, the conversation continues.
All right, welcome back. It's Say Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are discussing matters arising from the ongoing strike by the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian Universities, ASUU. We have reactions already from our viewers. We've taken advantage of our Twitter handle. You find that usually at the left-hand corner of your screen at NTAGMA. It will pop up presently. But let's take some of those tweets right now. Victor Swama tweets, the incessant ASUU strike is worrisome. Public universities should be able to have financial autonomy, and a review of school fees is imperative.
All right, now from Dele Jackson Solomon, when will this debacle frequently confronting our tertiary education system be overcome? Let's stop playing politics with the life of Nigerian youths. Only the children of the masses are affected by the incessant industrial action embarked upon by ASUU. Let government settle this once and for all.
Shani Michael Makoji, I don't know why federal government keeps using the old philosophy of governance but expects different results. Is that not deception?
Now, Ume Chimezia says, the amount of money government owes ASUU is increasing as years go by. One day the strike will be in years, not months, if nothing is done.
Ahmed Gambo Ibrahim tweets, ASUU should look for other ways to vent their anger instead of these yearly strikes, causing setbacks for students.
Now, Dele Jackson Solomon says, ASUU not appearing on Good Morning Nigeria is seemingly rejecting dialogue, which is not in the best interest of the country. Let's keep dialoguing with federal government for implementation of demands. Well, actually, we have told you earlier on that ASUU was actually invited to this program, but there's inability for them to be here, and so all our efforts proved abortive.
Chibuzo Jonathan tweets, our politicians and government don't care about our institutions because their kids and relatives school abroad. Only poor Nigerians suffer the consequences.
Festus Akimboewa, while the government has treated ASUU poorly, incessant strikes is harmful to our children's education and portrays educators as militant.
Ahmed Gambo Ibrahim again. We depend so much on government for funding. What about internally generated revenue by universities?
Now, Kolo Ibrahim, until we make education the topmost priority of national development, hiccups and strikes in the sector will hardly abate.
Festus Akimboewa, ASUU has succeeded in causing huge disruptions to the progress of our young people for personal and selfish reasons.
Ibrahim Tudu, I believe the guests in your panel supporting ASUU strike, their kids are not studying in Africa, but Europe and America. I'm not sure that is true, gentlemen.
Wait for them to answer.
Okay.
All right, this is Abdul Rahman Muhammad. Abdul Rahman Muhammad twist. The problem is that ASUU is too selfish. They should collaborate with all the wings of Teachers Union in order to save education in Nigeria.
Now, Ibrahim Tudu says vice chancellors who cannot manage their IGR in schools are looking for government exclusive funding, and he says why. And the one case we just read now, it says ASUU is too selfish, and that brings us to one issue here, which I've been wanting to bring up for this conversation: the fact that ASUU members don't take their primary assignment very seriously. They're always more energetic and vibrant when it comes to issues that concern them alone, and that's one of the things the students are saying, and I'd like us to react to that. But you're a current professor at the moment, so how does it play out in your university?
Yeah, the issue is actually it should be looked at in the perspective that will give us a broader picture. The strike or whatever action the ASUU people are doing is not selfish. If it were a case where you are talking about only what goes to you, then you talk about selfishness. But this is a situation where they are talking about infrastructure. They are talking about facilities that will enhance teaching and research. They are talking about even the welfare of the students themselves. They are talking about what actually can be done to enhance even the image of the nation in terms of education, capacity, production, and all that. So you find out that it is not about selfishness, but coming closer to the issues of what really do they do as academics. They take their primary assignment very seriously. Like if you take my university, for instance, you hardly find a situation where teachers don't go to class. for all the hours that we have a monitoring team that reports on a weekly basis who has gone to class, who has not gone to class, and you have over 99% attendance. And they go on time and they do their duties. In fact, if you take it beyond that, you realize that for my universities, for instance, even when the issue of strike came up, we voted against the strike. Majority of the people voted against the strike. But once the strike was declared, we had no option than to join. So you find out that it is not about selfishness at all.
But University of Ilorin is not on strike.
University of Ilorin
but they voted against it.
University of Ilorin had issues with ASUU from the past 10 years.
That's right, I agree with that.
So you find out that they have not been in the mainstream of ASUU.
The University of Lagos at some point wasn't also part of some of the strikes that we have seen in recent times.
Yes, it can be explained.
Why? Or how, rather?
You find out that once you have a situation where the leadership of the university is isolating itself from the generality of the people, then you have a problem. That is why you talk about real selfish reasons. People feel that because they are comfortable within the zone of their operation, they don't want to talk about other people's welfare. And they say that this particular thing you're talking about does not affect my university at the moment, so I'm not going to participate. And that's the kind of things that, but there are minority in the system. So you find out that anybody that is desired of development will want to see a situation where it is not just about his own particular environment, but it is about the nation. And that is what is happening to us.
All right, Professor Memona, thank you very much. Professor Haya, let's bring it again, bring you back into this issue that my colleague Kieran just raised with regard to the quality of performance, performance evaluation, if you like, of our academics versus the requests, that they keep making or demands that they keep making that then lead them to industrial action. Some persons are of the view that sometimes we don't get the value for money in terms of investments in academics, whether in problem solving, whether in terms of the quality of teaching, whether in terms also of the quality of research, versus what you find abroad. That, we actually perhaps do not have, in some of the cases, the best and brightest in our ivory tower.
It's a situation of blaming the victim, actually. The ASUU, NUC says the ratio of staff student should be 1 professor to 40. And in most of the universities, it's 1 professor to over 100. I believe that the university professors or the university system is one of the industries that has continued to operate when all other industrial sectors in this country, including the civil service, including the military and the armed forces, and the university continues to produce manpower that feeds all the other sectors. They are producing the highest level manpower. And certainly we wish they were better, because you can't compare Nigerian university education with the pottery sum that is invested in the system, with even some of the smallest countries, like Malaysia, where we send our children to go and study now. The fact is that there is no research going on in Nigerian universities. There's no development, there's no innovation. The issue is there's only basic research that is not leading to commercialization, and that the industry is not putting in money to education, to university to set up, say, research parks, so that the Nigerian educational system is not addressing the Nigerian problem. There's no question about that.
Precisely.
And precisely because they do not have the resources to invest university energy. And I'm not actually given an excuse for people, say, in the social sciences, for instance, people in religious studies, for instance, could also come out with very strong policies, studies, research that benefits the country. The issue of Boko Haram. Sit together, bring all the Islamic scholars in Nigeria. Just like South Africa had to bring scholars to dismantle apartheid, whether apartheid originated from the Bible, which said that the children of Africa were cursed and therefore should be slaves to the white masters, or vice versa. The scholars came, all the religious people came, we've studied the Bible, and they found that this was a false doctrine, and apartheid did not succeed. In the same way, the scholars should come and trash out the arguments so that we can build a Nigeria where people do not have to be killed because of the sect of the Islam they belong in, or they belong to other religions, or try to take over a country. This can be done by our intellectuals. And I agree that far too often our university professors are just sitting there to go on strike on bread and butter issues. They do not take on issues of